Sunlight feels so wonderful in the morning, especially when it was 42 degrees last night. And I was awake, I think, by around 3:30 and stayed awake for a couple hours, feeling the cold, rolling around, trying to stay warm. And I was reflecting on my experience with homelessness during that period of time, and remembering 2 years ago when I was in a similar situation. I was actually camping at this campground here. I had a car, which I don't have at the moment, which made life a little bit easier and gave me more opportunities to make money. But there was a point in November as things were winding down here, and I was feeling the crunch, and I hadn't found any work, and I was desperate for like $20 to cover a night here before I found another job. And there was like a 48-hour period where I was ready to be done. It's happened a few times in the last 10 or 12 years where I just didn't want to live anymore. And that was probably the most intense experience that I had. And I remember finding this job on Craigslist, or this opportunity on Craigslist, to be a part of a suicide research out of Notre Dame, and they were going to pay money. And so I signed up for it, and you had to like clock in every hour, I think it was, and answer a series of questions. And the questions were basically like, do you feel suicidal? Have you had suicidal thoughts in the last hour? Blah, blah, blah. And I did it for about 3 days, maybe 4 days, and I realized this is not helping in any way, shape, or form with this desire to kill myself. Yeah, of course I've had suicidal thoughts because I have to answer these fucking questions every hour or 2 hours. And I did a little bit of research. Actually, I emailed back and forth with the guy who's running it and just like complained to him about these questions and told him what my experience was like. And he apologized, but he said like something about how the NIH was informing the questions that had to be asked. And I was like, oh, surprise, surprise. Good old Dr. Fauci is behind this this suicidal watch list or whatever the fuck it was. But I definitely felt like my mind was being played with and tormented. But I was laying in bed last night remembering that whole experience, and reflecting on the state of my body and my nervous system during that time and over the last 10 or 12 years, and how much my nervous system was like in a state of overwhelm and shock, and just like different life experiences, life events would happen that would just like send me back into kind of a spiral. And there's experience that I had when I was a child, 6th grade. I was molested by one of my classmates, and he choked me out. And the next 2 years I was beat up and just had a lot of like traumatic experiences during that time. And I realized that a lot of like that hardwired my nervous system for being in a state of trauma. And I thought I had it dealt with. I had talked through it with people, and got back from being a missionary in China to America, and I just went through this incredible collapse. My marriage fell apart, and I stopped wanting to go to church, and just had this complete I don't know, it was just like everything fell apart. And I feel like the last 12, 14 years since that, it's a pattern, a cycle, where I get up, I'm able to put my life back together, go to work, get a job, stay faithful to it, and then just the stress of it builds up, and something happens in the midst of it. Somebody is, there's numerous stories that I don't even want to go into, of just being triggered back into this state of fight or flight or freeze, and my tendency is to back away so I can reset my nervous system and not, react. And I've learned a lot of great techniques for resetting my nervous system, but last night I was reflecting on all of that, 12-year period, 13-year period, and realizing that my nervous system is in a very different state. Like, even though those thoughts, the overwhelming thoughts of like, fuck, what am I gonna do? I've got my back against the wall. I don't have enough money to stay here any longer. I've got this tiny house that I have to move. I don't know where to move it. And I don't know where I'm gonna live once I figure all that shit out. Actually, I have an idea, but I'm not gonna share that with you because it's secret. It's a secret spot for stealth camping. That's all I'm gonna say. And I gotta find a job, and it just makes things so much more challenging when you're starting from the bottom of the barrel and trying to get back up. And I've done it many times, and it's not necessarily fun. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody, but all of those thoughts and reflections were going through my mind last night, and I was remembering going downtown Grand Rapids this summer when I was in a similar place, before I had work, and I found this job building play sets. I was stealth camping in the woods, and had like $20 to my name, and I just was like, I'm sick of sitting around applying for jobs. I'm gonna spend this last $20 on watermelon, and I'm gonna go downtown on the bus, and I'm gonna chop up watermelon and feed it to the folks that live at Hartside Park, and just like share a moment with them, and because it was super hot, and I knew that they would probably appreciate it. And I did it twice. The second time, some guy had a knife that he was like holding in my face and talking all crazy, and but being downtown with those people, and just like recognizing how traumatized they are and how they're continually like brought back into this loop of trauma. And especially because most of them are African American, I think it's far more challenging for them to get out. And I don't think people really understand, those people who are nice and safe and warm in their cars or in their houses, having their jobs. Like, it's so easy to judge those people, this person, as like a failure, or a fool, or I don't know what litany of judgments and labels are cast upon the homeless people, but there's a lot. And this guy Charlie Kirk, when he died, I watched one of his videos where he was debating back and forth with a woman about homelessness, and she worked in a shelter, and she had years of experience working with homeless people, and so she was speaking from her perspective about why things were the way they are with homeless people and what they need, and he was disagreeing with her and saying that she was wrong, and I resonated with a lot of what she said, but he kept coming back to this statement. He was like, it's a choice. They've made a choice to be that way. And said some really harsh things about, well, we're just gonna push them back into shelters and stuff like that. And I just realized, like, or it made me really upset. His take on the whole situation. He's right. It is a choice. It's a series of choices that were made, but the circumstances that were surrounding those choices and the options and the opportunities that were available in the midst of those choices, but also the state of mind that people are in when they fall into the choice to become homeless. There's so many factors that go into it. There's so much nuance that goes into it. And by just like callously saying it's a choice and they've chosen to be there, I mean, obviously this guy had a problem with empathy, so there's no wonder he had that perspective. But, I guarantee you that the majority of people who end up homeless are or have been molested at some point in their life, sexually molested, physically abused in some way. I'm guessing that a lot of them, if they grew up in poverty, surrounded by poverty, they were introduced to drugs early on, probably were offered alcohol by an uncle or a dad or an aunt or something, or a joint or or some crack or whatever the case may be. And so as children, they're getting introduced to this, and that's the circumstances they're growing up in. That's the environment they're experiencing, and that is the framework for the choices that they make. Thankfully, I did not have a lot of those experiences. I had a stable family that was around me, and even though I had a series of traumatic events that kind of led to an imprint of trauma in my life that I've had to cope with and deal with and figure out how to unwind from my system, there's always been some level of support from the community around me. And because I had a baseline of what it felt like to be in a healthy state of mind, I have been able to get back there before being triggered out of it. And at a certain point, it feels like the shame and the hopelessness that builds up. I don't know, I'm just really fucking resilient. But I know a lot of people, if you feel like the world is against you, it's not easy to get back up and to have a different perspective and to see life in a way that's that allows you to imagine something that is different from your experience. I know that I live in my imagination pretty strongly because of those experiences and the mirror effect of like that being reflected back to me in different points of my life. And it's why one of my friends came out here a little bit ago, and she brought another friend with her, and she said something to him about how Josh has lots of ideas. And if you've been following me for any length of time, you know how true that is. And it probably looks like a scattershot of ideas that never go anywhere. from the outside. I don't honestly know, and I don't really care how it looks from the outside, um, because I know my heart and my intention behind all of my ideas, and I also know that the ideas that I have are largely in contradiction to the status quo and in the way things are designed to operate, and which makes it 10 times harder to bring them to life and find the funding for them, and the support for them. And so, yeah, I guess I'm saying all of this to encourage whoever watches this to have a different perspective on people who are homeless, to have some compassion for them, and you know, I don't necessarily think that homeless shelters are really the best answer, but they're an answer, and they're a solution. And so if there's ways that you can show up and humanize people who are homeless and care for them, show them some love, I'm sure that would help a lot. Give them a different mirror of life and their life experience. I know there's one friend in particular, I don't know that he really wants to be mentioned or honored, but he has been there. Oftentimes he shows up in my life when I'm like kind of collapsing, and there's been other friends along the way too, and I'm grateful for everybody that's showed up, whether you know what I'm going through or not. It's I think the most essential part of life is the relationships that we create and sustain, and the support we offer one another. So cheers to the adventure of life, and may you find a multitude of ways to bring love and beauty into this world.